Hello everyone, welcome to Weapon Technologies. So today we are going to discuss about MVC project structure. As in the previous video, you must have seen that we have created a default MVC application and which we were having so many existing folders. So in this project, we are going to discuss about MVC project structure, right? So I have taken this screenshot from the last video. You can see this. We are having this MVC structure: app start, content, controllers, font, model, script, views, global.acx file, favicon, package.config, startup.cs file, and web.config file, right? So now let's start and study one by one what exactly each and every folder is meant, right? So first of all, we have app data folder. So this data basically we use this folder when we want to keep our data instead of SQL Server database. We want to read or write our data into the application. In that case, we need this app data folder, so which is required for reading and writing into the application. Now next is your app start folder. That's a very important folder. In this we used to put all the configuration files. For example, when we want to register our routing in the application, we want to register filters and bundle configuration. In that case, we used to register all these things in this app start folder. In a later video, I will be telling in a detail what exactly is routing and how the mapping is done with the help of routing when the request is transferred controller to the um, from controller to another controller or from controller to the model and to the view, right? And in the filter configuration, we basically implement you can say that when we want to implement authentication or authorization, or when there is a need in the application, when we want to implement output caching concept, in that case we go for filtering in the application. So all these configuration can be done in this app start folder, right? Now let's move on to the content. In this folder, we basically used to store all the images and CSS files other than the script. For storing all the scripting files, we do have a separate script folder in this MVC application structure, right? So for this content folder, we only store especially the images and all the CSS files related to this application, right? Now let's move on to the next, which is our main pillar of the application, that is a controller. So in this controller, we used to put all the controller, or we can say that we place all the controllers which we create in our application. Later on, I would be telling in a very detail how we can create controllers step by step. But as of now, you keep it in mind that under the controller folder, we used to keep all the controllers, right? Now let's move on to the next, that is font. These are the some custom font which are basically used by the Bootstrap, that is by default in your application, right? And next is your models. So this model is nothing. If you have watched my last video, in that I must have told you about that models. That model is nothing. Basically, it consists of classes with all the properties and method, and classes which we are defining, that basically define the state and behavior of that particular class, right? So this model is basically used to fill the data and send the response to the view, and from view to the controller with the help of this model, right? In a later video, in the later videos, we will be discussing about these models in a very detailed. So no, you don't worry about this. Then we have a script folder, which I was talking when we were discussing about this content. In content, we used to store only the images and CSS files. For scripting, we do have a separate folder given by the MVC application structure that we used to place all the scripting file in this of the application, like jQuery or JavaScript files or .js file or any other scripting languages which we want to keep. We can place it in this script folder, right? Now let's move on to the next folder, that is our views. So view are nothing, as I told you earlier also, it is a simply a user interface which is being rendered on the client machine on the browser at the end user, right? So we used to put all the views, or we can see all the .cs HTML file, basically in this MVC application structure with extension .cs HTML file. These are represented for the views, right? Now the next one is favicon.icu. This favicon file is basically is nothing. Let's suppose when we are developing any application, and when we run our application in any browser, so at the top of the browser, at the top of the window, at the top of the tab, I would say, we can see that a small icon is coming in that particular tab. So that is basically a favicon.icu, right? Now the next one is package. This is the very most important part. In this, we used to put all the packages along with the version information details, right? Let's suppose in the future if we want to upgrade our application, so we can go into this package folder and we can see all the information with the version that which version is being used, is currently being used in this application, and which .NET framework this application is targeting. So according to our need, we can upgrade our application, right? I'll just show you all these folders in a few minutes. Now the last one is web.config file. Web.config file is a main file where we used to do all the configuration settings, right? We can see that all the configuration related things we used to put in web.config file. For example, we used to put database connection string, or when we want to set any custom error page for that particular application. In that case, we used to put all this configuration in web.config file. Beyond this, we used to put all the we can see all the assemblies information also, plus when there is a need that when we want to implement authentication, or when we want to apply some settings regarding your session, your cookies, in that case we this web.config file is very much beneficial and very much useful, right? So this was all about the basic detail about all the folders which we are having in this MVC application structure, right? Now let's move on to the our project which we created in a last video. You can see over here, and the thing which I discussed with you, the same app data, app start, content controller, right? So if we click on app start, we can see that we are having already route config.cs file, filter config.cs file, bundle config.cs file, which I discussed a few minutes back about all this configuration we used to place in this folder, right? And accordingly we can also create our own configuration if we want to add a new configuration setting. So we can add a class in that particular abstract folder, and we can do the settings accordingly, right? Now content is nothing, as I told you that it is used for storing the images and all the CSS related things. Controller, you can see this is a by default controller of this application which we created in the last video. So home controller, account controller. So we will be discussing about all these things in a very detail, and we will be creating from the scratch in our upcoming videos. So don't worry about this. And now next we have fonts. Fonts are these are basically fonts which is basically used by the Bootstrap, right? If we are using Bootstrap in our application, in that case it is very beneficial. And then we have models. Model is nothing, is that's a collection of all the classes we can see. So we can define classes according to our need, and we can define the state and behavior of that class under this model folder, right? And and let's suppose if we don't want to go with this structure, so MVC application has provided this flexibility also, that any developer can create its own structure. Let's suppose if I don't want to go with these models, I can create my own separate assembly and own separate folder, and accordingly I can create a link between these controllers views, right? So that's very flexible. That depend on the developer, that what we want, whether we want to go with this existing application, or whether we want to create our separate assembly, or you can say a separate class library, right? Now next we have script folder, which I told you that we used to store all the scripting languages. You can see here like Bootstrap, jQuery, right? Respond.js file. All these scripting files we used to keep in this script folder. Next, we have views. In views, we used to keep all the views. That is your HTML file. You can see that the extension of all the views under home. If we click, you can see about.cs HTML, contact.cs HTML, and index.cs HTML. So according to our need, we can create our own views depending on the requirement in the application, right? And this is a shared folder which is common to all of the views. So this all the HTML which is placed inside the shared folder, that can be used by all the views under this view folder, that I will be discussing in the upcoming videos, so don't worry about that. Now moving to the last one, which I discussed, web.config file. Here we used to keep all the configuration. You can see that like all the app settings related things, or we can keep all the configuration, like giving the placing all the information about assemblies, and if we want to keep database connection string and any custom LPs, so we can keep it over here only. Then we can then yeah, one thing I want to tell about global.acx file, which I didn't told you in my last slide. Global.acx file is a main file when your application is deployed on your IIS server. So when the first request is coming from the server, so the first request comes into this global.acx file. So the controller will hit to this method firstly, right? So the control will hit first of all to this method, that is application start method. And in this method we can see we have already registered all the filters, routing configuration, bundles, and all other stuff. If we want, we can add it into this file. So that's a global file, and the first request always come into this method when we are working with this MVC application. Remember this thing. And next we have package. As I told you that in this we used to store all the version information about all the packages that we are using. Like you can see jQuery or ASP.NET MVC version we can see. So let's suppose in the future if we want to upgrade our application by looking into this package, that which application version we are using, and to which .NET framework it is targeting. You can see this is using .NET 4.6.1 framework version, right? So accordingly we can change this all these configuration in the future, right? And the last one is your startup.cs file. This is nothing. That's open web interface file Microsoft has provided inbuilt. Let's suppose in future if there is a need, we want to implement authentication or authorization. So with the help of this Microsoft.oven, we can achieve this thing. Right. So by using this open web interface, that's OWIN, full form of this open web interface. So for implementing authentication or authorization, we can configure all these things into this file, right? So that was all the basic structure detail about this MVC application, right? So in the next upcoming videos, we will be discussing in a very detail about controllers, model, and view. And I will be showing you how we can create controller, model, and views from the scratch and how they are interrelated to each other. Right. So that's it for today. Uh, Take care. Bye bye. Thanks.